It's my great pleasure to introduce Dermot Healy tonight. Dermot is a writer's writer. He has written in all of the major genres. Fiction, he has 5 books. Poetry, he has 5 books. He has a memoir, and he's written 9 plays. He's won the Hennessy Award twice, and the Tom Gallen Award, and the Encore Award. And in 2011, he was shortlisted for the Poetry Now Award for his 2010 poetry collection, A Fool's Errand, which is over here for sale. Heaney is a member of Astana and its 10-member governing body, the Taoiseach, I knew I'd say it right, Taoiseach, and lives in County Sligo, Ireland. On his recent novel, Long Time No See, which was recently published, Betsy Wilford of the Miami Herald begins her review. Book reviewers tend to use 7 words or phrases: enthralling, luminous, heartwarming, brilliant, charming, compulsively readable, extraordinary. Too often these descriptions are hyperbole, helium-filled balloons, but Dermot Healy's new novel deserves them all, and in the best sense. The novel is a book of voices and dialogues, saturated with the wisdom that comes from observation and years of paying attention and writing things down. We hear the young narrator of the novel, Philip Feeney, realize a rough nugget of Irish wisdom while building a new wall beside an old one. Quote, "Every rock will find its place in the wall. No stone should be too proud and stand out from the rest." The voices are compelling, sensitive to inner lives, and full of truths half said. The book has just been released here in the States. It just had its launch in New York the other night, and we have copies back there of the novel also. Dermot spoke about his most recent volume of poetry, A Fool's Errand, to Villanova students yesterday. The book is either, depending on how you consider it, 1 long poem or 89 short poems, all forming shadow lines of the V formed by geese flying in the slipstreams of the leader. He noted how the book had been written over 10 or 11 years, a bit at a time, as the geese came and returned and went every year, as memories formed and resurfaced. In his memoir, Bend for Home, Healy has written, "What happened is a wonder. Though memory is always incomplete, like a map with pieces missing. But it's all right. It's entered the imagination, and nothing is ever the same." Tonight we all enter Healy's slipstreams of imagination. Please join me in giving Dermot Healy a very warm Villanova welcome. All right. So we'll have a reading, and then afterwards we can have some questions.
I'll start with the novel, Long Time No See, and it felt like a good title because it took an awful long time to do it. I started years ago and finished it about 2002. And am I all right here in sound? Yeah. And so I'll just start with a small piece at the beginning and 2 other little pieces in it. It's about a young man, and he goes down to help his granduncle and his friend, 2 old men, goes down and brings them certain things, including food and drink, and things out of place, and then reads sometimes at night for his uncle because his own granduncle can't read. And quite a lot of the people that I met over the time where I live in Sligo, quite a lot of them don't read, but they have better, they haven't got the idea, they have better memories than those who can read. I headed down, by the way, his friend is called the Blackbird, the old man's friend. I headed down to the townland of Ballantrae on a Force 8 to light the fire towards the beginning of August. "Aha," said Granduncle Giorgio, opened the door a fraction. "She's windy," I said. "Oh, it's you," he said. "It is Uncle Giorgio. He was my granduncle, but sometimes he's me uncle and sometimes me granda." "Hold her. I have it. Right now. Okay, Terrace Jock," he shouted, meaning come in. I took the handle and slid through with a couple of newspapers under my arm. He stepped back as I stepped in. The tablecloth rose. Timmy the dog done a turn, and I swung the door shut. Jojo studied me with his back against the shaking panels. I was expecting my dear neighbour, Mr. Blackbird. "Oh, sorry about that, sir." And I said to myself, "That's him." And it was me. It was you, but it was his knock. You see, a knock can carry anyone's signature on a day like that. I could have sworn. You know what it is, son? Memory is a stranger who comes to call less and less. Aye. And sometimes he's not welcome, if you know what I mean. Oh, he could be anyone, is that what you mean? But not you. He turned the key, let down the latch, pulled back the curtain on the window and looked out. Is it the northwest? He was asking about the wind. It is. The worst, but not as bad as February 9th in 87, he said as he came back from the misty, drenched window to the table. I don't like the look of it. The worst is at the filling in of the moon, he said, handing me the leather-handled knife. And then he put a plate of unboiled bacon before me. You're just in time. The bird will not stir that day, I'll warrant you. He'll stop above in the bodgeons, that sorry old bed of his. I began to saw off some of the raw fat, and he threw the first slice to Timmy the dog, who nursed it up against the bedroom door. Then Jojo brought the remainder of the bacon joint into the kitchen and set it into a pot of boiling water filled with parsley and chives. He put the small slices of fat onto a saucer on the middle shelf of the dresser, out of reach of Timmy, and alongside the picture of the wayward lad. They were for his rat trap that he would set last thing that night. Now, he said, how's the form, Mr. Psyche? Oh, not so bad, Granda. Are you fit for dealing with a bad-tempered crater like me? I am. He stood back and looked at the dresser, then lifted down one of his prayer books and handed it to me. Read, mister, he said, from the Psalms. The Bible he always called the Psalms. I picked a page at random, and as always, it fell open at one of the texts, where he had turned down the corner of a page from past readings. And behold, I said, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind rent the mountains, and brake in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. He was not, he said. And after the wind an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire a small voice. Amen, said Jojo quietly. We're in this together, Mr. Psyche. We're now, the two boys, the two older men, are drinking Malibu. I went out to the shed for turf, and when I came back in, the blackbird turned his troubled eyes on me. Just before you came in, he said, the room was full. Full of what, I asked. Why, he says, the ghosts of hens. Did you ever get that? Never. Nor me, said my granduncle. I saw no bucking hens. Well, they were here. More bucking madness. Well, let me see, the blackbird explained, sitting up. The rooster, he says, comes first cock-a-doodling and screeching with no sound. It's a terror to hear a sound that is not there. Have you ever heard a sound that's not there? No, I haven't. Well, you will, in time. Definitely nodded Jojo, and he rose his eyes to heaven. Now, the blackbird explained, he, the rooster, stands over there, and he indicated the far corner of the room, on the book stand that has no books. That's where the rooster stands, you know, cock-a-doodling, with his neck back, and a run of blue temper from his bill to his head feathers, the comb on the top of his skull all bristling, and dreadful black eyes, I can tell you, cock-a-doodling. Say cock-a-doodle. Cock-a-doodle. Well, you say it louder. Cock-a-doodle, cock-a-doodle. Very good, now you have it. Now you're cock-a-doodling, said Uncle Jojo. I am. You are, and you listen to a bucking madman. Cock-a-doodle. I can hear you, said the blackbird. That's right. But I can't hear him, do you see? That's the problem. Oh. And there, over there, he stands, raising one claw a little, just very slightly. And the blackbird rose and raised his right foot ever so quietly, just a fraction off the floor. Then he put it down, then he lifted it again like the rooster did, and he held back his head and said to me, Go cock-a-doodle. Cock-a-doodle, said Granda, Jojo and me together. He straightened up, and then you know what happens. No. In come the ghost hens. Indeed they do, said Jojo, and there's something shocking. Yes. They come flocking from everywhere, through the walls, the doors, the ceilings, the fireplace. And are they busy? Oh, they're very busy, said Jojo. And what did they start doing, sir? And the blackbird signalled in my direction. What did they start doing? Cock-a-doodling. No. So what did they do? They go, chukka-waka, chukka-waka, chukka-waka. Oh, right, said Jojo. The birds have changed their tune. Dead on. But they're not as loud as the rooster when I think of it, but loud nevertheless. Then all these ghost hens start their chanting. A chanting you can't hear, flocking round, raising their wings. Then the rooster jumps down out of his perch and starts chasing them round the room, and the hens go mad. And then what happens? Well, they're likely to land anywhere, on your head, anywhere to get away from him. And he chases them faster and faster, and then one of them lands in my pocket. He clapped his pocket. Then another. No. Yes, jeepers. And once this happens, the next hen jumps into my pocket, and another, till there's only the one left, just the one. And the rooster's left chasing the last hen round the room. And what does she do? She jumps into my pocket with a screech. And now there's no one but himself. And what does he do? He lets one last cock-a-doodle-doo-doo, said my grand, and bang, he goes into my pocket. And then what happens? You came into the room. And he wiped away a tear that was not there. Oh, and so here I am, he said. And he pulled out the lining out of his pocket, shook it, pushed it back in, and here I am, left with a pocketful of ghost hens. One of the jobs the young fella does to try and keep sane is go out and work on a wall, building a stone wall outside. I brought water to the sick cow who was lying in the meadow, looked out to sea, did 3 walls, the 3 lawns after Mass, the teachers, the bankers and the Germans, and I went to the wall at the back of the house. I was out there building stone for 3 hours. I'd been at this dry stone wall for 3 weeks, on and off, and it was good work. All you needed was a length of string, a few rocks, and a sense of balance. Sometimes I'd be building walls in my dreams. Some of the stones I used to come inland in storms. But today I started to haul from an old ruin up on the bank overlooking the sea. I got an awful bad feeling as I pulled the rocks out of the ruin. I had to tell myself over and over that they were going back into another wall. The ruin was supposed to be in a hen house way back, but it was the strongest built hen house I ever came across. There were massive stones in her. I could have been demolishing a small church, and sometimes I thought I was. A beehive hut, it might have been. A monk's chamber. I could even feel the balance of the man who built it. He drew the stone from the coral beach by ass and cart to the spot I was taking them from. As he built alongside me, I was pulling his work down. As he dropped the stone into place, I lifted it and carried it away. He built towards me, and I built away from him. I could feel the way he carried himself. He could have been a great-great-granduncle of mine. In his wall I came across chaffs of wheat that were still dry, the bones of coral, white marble, 1 clay pipe. I was over and back with the barrow, then I began to build, and he came with me. Fit in, stand back, put in a small stone, and follow the twine. Good man. He stood to the side watching me work. The light was going and coming, and there were sudden gusts of wind coming from the northwest. An empty bucket went flying across the field. A heave of salt flew across. Then up went a puff of sparks from the rusted transformer on the electric pole next to the house. The gust passed, the sky darkened. There was one faraway cackle of seagulls. The island drifted out of sight. "Good evening," said my father. I got an awful shock to find him standing behind me, right where I'd placed the ghost man. "Time to call a halt," he said. "It's getting dark." "Come on in. I'm trying to take a weight off your shoulders, Philip." I put in a few more stones and stood against the wall, then sort of took cover, ducked low, and turned for the house. One last little piece from it, to keep the time right. Are we all right in time? 2:07. I'm in a hospital in this piece. No, I think I'll leave that one. 278. Oh, maybe. The blackbird was sitting in an armchair by his bed in the hospital with his cap on his head. The wrist of his left arm was still in a sling. He was gazing straight ahead of him with a quiet look. On the tray, on the small bed, was half a bowl of ice cream. On the table, the Jean sat. In the next bed, a man was doing his crossword puzzle. The male nurse was singing. The bird saw these two people approaching him at the last moment. Long time, no see. Jojo, he said, and he offered his right hand, and they shook hands. Mr. Psyche, he nodded. Sir, I said, taking his hand, for the first time in my life, I didn't get the faraway smell of mint and perfume from him. Instead, he smelt of sweat and soap. He used to put perfume on every morning. How are you? Asked Jojo. I wiped away a tear before you came in, said the bird. It was my mother's. Oh, Christ. You see, I go into the past because they've denied me the present. There was a silence, and then his voice kicked in again. I'm still living in that crevice. I don't have a story, Jojo, because there is no story. I understand you. I can see everything out of the corner of my eye. I have a swollen gland in my brain. It's like a stitch of pain in the tooth. Now tell me, go ahead, what is constipation? Tell us. A handbag full of waste. Oh, Jesus, steady, Blackbird. You see, I'm not going to get better, but they won't let me home. And a whole lot of shit is piling up. I see. Hey. The male nurse in the stiff white coat came over and leaned down and sang a couple of notes in the bird's ear as he wiped his face with a wet cloth. How are you? Asked Jojo. Grand, the nurse said. Where are you from? The Philippines. Is there many living there? 88 million. Jesus Christ. On 7,000 islands. I'm inclined to think that as regards sex, said the bird, we should go back to the early days. When was that? The nurse asked. Back when you made love to yourself. Oh, that's a tricky affair, said Jojo. Indeed, it would be complicated now, but not back then 365 million years ago. There were more complex times. I don't know how it was done. Then we separated into two. Oh, like Shiite and Sunni, said the nurse, and Spanish and Chinese. Aye, and man and woman. The last time I saw her, she was wearing a cloak, and I was wearing a jumper, said the bird sadly. You were, and we took a waltz, you did. Then she wasn't there. Lonesome is as lonesome does, said Jojo. She walked out through the door, she did, and never came back. No, I'd rather live without the other sex. But you do. Not willingly. But you see, the truth is, I was always afraid of beautiful women. I could work either as a nun or a priest when I get out, if I could get out. Touch wood, said Jojo. The dark-haired, broad-shouldered nurse sang to the bird. Dahil sayo, dahil sayo. What language is that? I asked. Tagalog, he said. Then he sang in English. Because of you, I want to live until the end of time. Now, you look well. Bye-bye. Geese. And there's about 3,500 of them fly in from Newfoundland each year. Somewhere towards April 14th, then they go back in October, around the same, about the 10th. And moved into Sligo, and that was the first thing I saw was the geese coming out from, there's an island out. And it went on for years, and I began putting down little poems. So I just read various little ones. The leavings. Since I began to look up at your psalm, all of the instruments have turned into birds. I cannot watch a man in song without wanting to draw his hand flung open. With a pencil in the dark, I mark the long neck of the cello that flies ahead like a swan. The bass joins the banjo, the swing low over Carney as the page turner stands guard, ready to lean down and flick over when the pianist nods at the waves. A skein rises off stage, and always out there to the left is the straggler, the lone straggler, a violinist flying in from the sides, eyes darted from the script to the quartet, then back to the page to fill in the grave as he leans to the left with one shoe jumping on the ear of a spade. Oftentimes the sound of the geese is like an orchestra. Sometimes they come close, it lights up, then it goes into the distance. Then there's the odd, the straggler just doing his own sound and breaks away from the main contingent. And it's a lesson in memory, because they come so close to the one day, leave the one day, and then you have 6 months without them. What to do with the umbrella? Lay it in the aisle, stand it on the knee rest, lay it out in the seat. Instead, the soldier rests his forehead on it in prayer, as the footsteps of communicants go to and fro to the tap of the hymn, keeping time in shoes, heels, coughs, steps, the low, slow shuffle and pining sounds of little knocks from afar. A woman's firm heel, quilts, coats, the echoes gather up in a tremolo as the priest approaches the silent box and wheels, tripping on a footrest as he goes. Then the soldier in front salutes, lifts his chin off the head of the umbrella, and with a whisper kneels. A little finger and one thumb pick at the bass, I suppose, and send a line that drums from the tip of the bow across to the lamp in the corner. Another quick thread goes up and down the thrashing hair of the singer as she faces into the screech, mouth open, the rest to the side. Away to the left, in the dark on the cliff, sits the other singer whose turn is yet to come. And as she listens to the hum of Baroque, her unflinching eyes are constantly fixed above her heads on the lighthouse out on the Rock of John, turning off, turning on. That is history going over on the wing. Listen to the echo of the gaggle flying straight into forgetfulness. The same journey is made again and again by a wild goose, tamed by centuries of wind, which sets the hands on the clock year after year to map out remembrance and bring the unsure knowledge to the door of the rune on another island. And then enters the new beginning, the long silence, the last singing, the splash of incense that signals absence, and over there the soft carpet of reeds that leads at last to sleep. There's a little island off Sligo where they land. Then they come in each morning, go out in the evening, depending on what the wind is blowing. And it took me a long time to learn that the very earliest time things were cast. The watch, the time thing were actually done by the birds, by the movements, as in the swallow, as in the sparrow, as in the geese. And so a lot of it is to do with memory, how it mapped it out. A tied stone is an angry dog. This would be on the beach, I often saw that. A moored yacht travels far in a fog. The last tune of the night was the geese in the bog. While they're away, I work on the beach, according to advice I got from a man whose name I can't remember. The clouds build. A lone musician sets up his keyboard and driftwood. The heron, like a single note, stands for hours at the edge of the mirror. The sea is not now in a rage. The drowned man has his hands folded over his chest. I lean over to throw stones in a cage. We were being hit and losing the road and all that, so we had to put in a thing called gabions. You know them, the wire cages with stones inside, and it absorbs the power of the sea. So we're working on that for years, putting them up. There was no help we could get, but I had to do it. But as people would say, we could have built 5 or 6 houses while we were doing it. The sands are running out. Time drums into your lungs. Death is a memory of something that happened to you when you were young. You spit out the grains at first light and wash the body down. Wake and eat and step out to dig into the deep. Up on the ski slopes this Christmas, they're playing golf. Each spring they ship back the sands that were stripped off the Spanish strand in winter. I was asleep, watching the geese weed the sky as he breathed his last. Some of them are kind of in memory of people that died. The trash and shadows. I'm carted out of sleep, searching for a room under these rooms, at the back of those others with their windows. Not the long room that sits over everything, nor the small one put there by chance, but the long room where souls gather to talk, to take a breath before heading back the way we came. Behind me the stones are finding their place and are sitting on their own weight at last. The job is done, but something is missing from the curve that leads back towards that first unspoken word. While they're away, the geese, funny enough, you don't get the sentiment of remembrance. I was talking about this last night. You don't miss them. Once they're gone, you think they're going to return. So you're all set in that. I never speak your name in your absence, although I'm doing it now, but they're here in Ireland at the moment. I never speak your name in your absence. Once gone, your sound is replaced immediately by some other. The word that flies in like the minute hand is never heard until the bird is in the air above your head, bringing news of a lost dialect, in from the vast wastes of memory. Then the sound of making up begins all over again. A chant is heard of something forgotten, as the echoes that spell the sound go silent. Storms are promised that never come, and some not promised that do. They come out of the blue, because they're true, because they're true. Oh, they're true to their word, the storms not promised. And they wreck you, they do. 1,000 years of waiting in the goose field. Out the rocks, 1,000 rogue waves. The one that caught the lighthouse keeper fishing mackerel, that drowned the town man and his child below the Alt. The rogue wave is waiting far out at sea for all of us. Watch out. It comes on your blind side, just as you're casting. I'll finish with this one of this book, and I'll do two others. Open the front door, the back slams shut. The past is at me, it sits on my shoulder. The back is at me. It sits on the shoulder of the uncle who's haunting the future for signs. The ant is content to become the pet after living in the wild so long. The cousin, that wild creature whom we have yet to meet, is being tamed at the altar before being released into the unknown. Lift the wet stone today in the bitter cold, and it's light to the touch. Lift it in the warm morning, and it will grown heavy and blunt. Open the front door, the back slams shut. Jimmy Foley was a lad that lived up the road from me, and I used to go down and visit him, and he was quite an inspiration to the novel over there as the old man, and gave me a lot of the word. And one of the things he said to me one time, I went into him and I said, "Do you ever get lonely?" "Lonely? No, sure, I know that I'm here." On winter nights, myself and Jimmy Foley climb out of bed and put on our wings. Jimmy's for Ellen's, I'm for the Horseshoe. So we compromise and settle for Carney. Everybody there knows Jimmy. They all come up to admire the way he is himself, and yet never leaves another out. Not even me. For when I want to go, he's with me. We have to fly to a funeral. We have to see friends of his in Maharao. There's shopping to be done, fish gutted and salted, people to talk to in Wine Street, women to see on Harmony Hill. And then it's back through the clean cold air till we hit the miss. In the miss we lose touch. Well, we have an arrangement. He goes to his house and I go to mine. And whichever of us has his light lit first can expect the other to tea. Always as Jimmy's lamp lights up. And although I'm often tired enough to want to sleep and stay where I am, next to the few things I know best, by the time I fly to Jimmy's, I'm a new man. We leave our wings to the left of the fire to dry out and smoke woodbines. These are our winter nights, flying over Maharao, then sitting by the fire, waiting on our wings to dry. And I'd like to thank Joseph, and I picked out this poem If I can find it now. The reed bed, maybe, yeah. Just give me 1 second. I'll do the reed bed and then finish with another one. The reed bed was the thing down below. When I'd be walking down the road or going off into town, there was this reed bed on the right. I'd see it and love it and all that. The minute I was gone by it, I forgot it. And I didn't know what it was that I'd seen that I liked. And even though when I was looking at it, I knew it. It's a lovely, but for some unknown reason, it wouldn't stay up in the head. And eventually, I found a few notes I'd written and put together this poem. So it is with the reeds. I pass them daily, but the minute I've gone by, and the rustling stops somewhere behind me among the floating trees, they no longer exist. And then I start wondering, what is it I lost? What was that thing, that important thing I left behind me on the dreaming road? And then comes the moment when returning home, I turn perchance their way, and there they are, the familiars I lost that morning, sifting by the dark tree that marks the edge of the watery bed. A tossed acre of amber reeds, feather-headed, frail, summoning. And this is when they truly exist, when you come upon them at the last moment, and the eye suddenly catches them, nodding in their bed of cinnamon, getting ready in a flurry of whispering to leave you again. Sorry, I can't find it for you, Joseph. It's gone walkies. I just look at the front. Oh yeah, 42. This is a thing that happened in Omagh, 16th of August 1998. In Omagh, on a deserted street just after dawn, there was no one abroad but some lone cameraman taking a shot for the news. And at a slight incline above the piled debris, the only thing still working beyond his lens was the traffic lights. And there, though no car stirred, the lights went red, the lights went green, and red and green again, for stop, though no one stopped, for go, though no one went, nor stopped, nor went again. Undisturbed by all that happened, the lights still kept urgent traffic through the crack that opened between 10 after 3 and eternity, and then went faster as if the bomb had damaged time itself, and slowed again as if somehow they could go back to normality. Then faster still, the light for stop, the light for go, the light for stop, the light for go, the light for stop, for stop, for stop, for stop. Thank you.
Oh, I think people have a sense of Omagh and the bombing up there in 98. Do people have questions? Sorry, questions? Comments? I'll give you a second.
What's my accent?
Can you explain the Gambian?
Gabion. Gabion was a funny thing. You've seen them on the side of the roads. They'll be used, but they were used by the French army out in the desert because there was no protection. So they used them. They're a wire cage filled with stone, not big stone, not built like a wall, built more like to absorb. And they're used by various armies in the Lebanon when they're out. They were used throughout. And this man called Gabion, who was in Morocco, out in the desert, came back to France and sold it as a potential for the side of the sea, the side of the roads, and became a millionaire. Gabion. It's kind of that height. They can be a little bit bigger and only that length. And you fill them, not as, I'm just repeating myself, not as a wall, you fill them to absorb the energy when the sea hits it, or anything else, but it keeps earth from falling down onto railway lines. Good question, because lots of people ask me about that. Why I said about the Lebanon is because there was one particular general who used to walk with me dog on the beach, and one time I was filling up the gabi and he got down on his knees, and I said, "What are you at?" He's joking. And I said, "It saved their life. Took 3 bombs that were shooting at them." So, kind of worked on it for a few years. But you've seen them. They use them quite a lot in Australia and New Zealand. Some places don't think of them scientifically but they're great. They protected us now for about 6 years, 7 years.
Do you feel that this country has become more receptive to hearing from Irish authors? I know that I've read a lot of Irish authors, and often I've had to go online and get the books from Ireland. It feels like I'm seeing them much more available now, that the market's a little bit more open. Do you feel that's true?
Well, the truth is I haven't been in America all that often. I'm mostly in San Francisco, a few times in New York. So I wouldn't really, Washington, one time they gave me an award, but I wouldn't really know. In Canada, I know that I go there more often. And yes, there is sales going, but I really can't speak for here. But I think I know of certain people that have done well. So, yeah.
I mean, it's a nice thing, that these authors are becoming better known here, and it's easier to get the books.
Right.
Poetry book is poetry book is coming out.
Oh yes, that was by pure luck the other night. The publisher brought out me novel, said he wanted to do it, which would be kind of nice. Maybe I'll get another trip back. We'll be so tired this one.
I wanted to ask you about the voices in the novel. Are these are these characters from your life?
Well, I mentioned Jimmy Foley. They would be, but not really. When it enters into the thing, I'm using various things so the reader can hear, pick up on the nuance of one particular character, and then find the other one, so that you can add to it. As a matter of fact, where I came across this first was in Elmore Leonard over here. Elmore Leonard did it in his books. And sometimes there might be 3 or 4 pages of dialogue without a he said or she said. And one of the things he said one time was, if you said, she says, I love you, he said softly. No, it doesn't work because you don't say he said softly. You know what I mean? You say, I love you. Do you? Or whatever, but you don't actually put in the, whatever it's called, the adverb, the descriptive thing. That in actual fact then the dialogue is not working. If you have to put it in, that means you're uncertain. And it was kind of to get it from a detective book. But there had been quite a few, say, runs of dialogue books in Ireland. But this time I decided to let go with just the dialogue without an interior. I think we talked about it, but I feel like I'm repeating myself last night. But it's kind of just, because I came across it in various books in Russia, and some of the ones where in actual fact you are travelling through voices. And I thought, since we do a lot of communication through voices, besides what we think about when we're alone or with other people, sometimes the voice does carry oddments of what's going on up here. What? You said what? One of the things last night I picked up on was Beckett. When Beckett, Waiting for Godot, his 2 characters on, Estragon and Vladimir, and one of them says, I'm going. The other says, so am I. And just down below is, nobody moves. And Beckett would have captured that. That's on stage. But in the book form, it's kind of interesting if you can get it. Now, sometimes it can be quite difficult. But I tried it.
It seems to work.
Well, I have to leave it up. I can't say it myself. One of the things I missed out on last night when we were talking about Irish literature, where it might come from, was an early one where the written word is actually built in law. It's written in stone. Okay? And the other part of it was to attack that, to go against it. Where this came from was in the early writing down of the Bible, when it was written down, all of a sudden, those people that were in the monasteries, or not the monasteries, there would have been earlier universities. One was for remembering for the chieftains, remembering for the surgeons, remembering for the lawyers. So the people remembered, there was no writing. And a story that's way back, 3rd century, Cian Fellet, head full of wonder, son of the High King of Ireland, was struck a severe blow in Armagh, which left part of his brain exposed, the part with which you forget things. He was taken to Tún Dracún monastery, not a monastery, a surgeon's place, and operated on by the blind one, Dalan, who cut off the part of the brain with which you forget things. When he gained consciousness in the morning, he sat there disturbed by everything he saw, because he could not forget it. Everything he looked upon was there stuck in his brain, everything. And he was driven to write down his memories. And that's how writing came to Ireland. And funny enough, that's the same one as in Japan, the same one as in other places. It's not just stuck there, but it came in that early. And so the people that remembered up above, all the bards were driven out and took off. And that's where you get all this thing about, stupid stories up on top of mountains, where the old stories, they took them away with them and let them back in. And it's an extraordinary thing, because a lot of the women carried the bardic stories away. And so when the novel came into being and some of the poems, it was funny enough, it was the women that wrote the first of the books. And the law went against them. As a matter of fact, the novel was banned in quite a lot of countries for years, because it was seen as a fictional, never mind sentimental account, but it was seen as a wrong account of life, and it released the subconscious. And so hence you had that thing when the women published novels, 1670, they came out as men. So there's a whole story in that particular thing to do with memory. And an interesting thing to look into. Ceannfellad, if you can, Ceannfeelad. No one wrote it down. But it's a lovely story. Because I remember telling it to Seamus Heaney, and he'd never come across it. It was written just in one of them early books. But it has a whole, Are we done?
Are there other questions?
Speaking of Seamus Heaney, do you want to tell us who is your favorite Irish writer?
No, they might hear, so I can't tell you.
Leaving yourself out.
I know, I'm a great fan of lots of people. And in all the various, from Brian Friel, Seamus, all the way through to Pat McCabe, Michael Hartnett as a poet, a great grapher. And there'll be a huge amount of people. And up here the brain won't register the names, but and short stories. I love the short story form, so there'll be quite a lot of people in that. From Sean O'Whalan, Frank O'Connor, to a whole host. Plays. Again, I mentioned Beckett, but there would be quite a lot of playwrights that would be into. And Eugene McCabe as a playwright and short story writer. He's wonderful. I tried my best there. Roddy Doyle will hear me talking, so I better sit. Okay, folks.
How and when did you start to write? And do you think you'll be like Herman Wouk, publishing a book when you're 97?
I don't
and
think
planning
so.
another one?
I don't think so. I find it a bit difficult with the memory now. And so I had to keep a notebook at hand to let me know what I'm thinking. And I started young with essays in the Irish language and poems written in English. And from the very early was taken by it. And I mentioned this last night, I'll mention it again. We're very lucky at one stage because we had a school teacher who brought in Charles Dickens. It wasn't on the menu. That's the wrong word, of course. It wasn't on it. And he introduced Tale of Two Cities once a week for an hour. And so that was living a different life, that age. And so sometimes it's lovely when you slip someone young a book and you see them entranced. And today, by the way, I just saw a girl drawing cats on top of the thing for travelling on trains. And she was perfect. Going away for about 20 minutes, she drew about 10 cats. With perfect eyes. And to a certain extent, you need that when you're, reading. You need the little books to get them. And one of the great ones we got was from the States over here, was the classic comics. They arrived. My brother used to send them over. And that was a little addiction.
We have a lot of geese around here, but they're not revered.
I don't think these ones are either. It's a different one if you're alone in the landscape and they fly over the barnacle. It's a different one when you're in a place that has plenty. No, it's just this actually, 3-4 places to land, that's it. And then this thing of arriving on the day and going, going on the same day. And that's what stuck in my head. But also it's just the familiarity. And by the way, this year or last year, they haven't done the same job, because I think they saw a TV programme that I made about them. They actually haven't come in the same way.
They come in on the same day, though?
Oh yeah, but they didn't do the journey over the house like as in romantic times. Okay. Uh-huh.
Well, yesterday, one of our local radio personalities interviewed Colm Torbeen. And at one point in the interview, he said, and this is about stereotypes, which kind of drives me nuts, and I've had to work against the Irish stereotype. It's very prevalent in Philadelphia, but anyway, he said people would often say when he was on a tour and talking about his book, "Oh, well, you Irish, you're storytellers." He said, "I am a novelist, I am an author, I am a writer, and I craft these words, and I work hard at this." And I was very taken by that, because one can be perceived, if you're good at something, that it comes to you naturally, when in fact it is a job. And
It is a job, yeah. It's the working. And if you don't do the work, and that was just one of the things we talked about, when you're doing a novel, you have to do about 3 hours, 4 hours each day. And if you drop one day and return to it, you don't know where you are. You actually have to keep up the work. It's a hard one to believe, but it's true. And if you don't, the feeling of guilt is one thing, but the actual feeling that you'll have to spend another 3-4 years doing what you could finish in 2 years. So the work ethic is part of it. And so while I'm standing here, I feel guilty.
What makes you decide whether you want to write a poem, a play, a short story, or a novel? And it's
When I'm in one, I'm not in the others. And so if I can get close to the finish of one lot. But one of the reasons why the 2 books took me so long is we kept going from one to the other and lost me way. So if you stay in one discipline for as long as you can. But with the poems, you're not working every day. You might leave it for a month, you know what I mean? So they go on to a different period. You return to the prose, and all of a sudden, you're going back. So it's better to stay in one discipline as long as you can.
well, does a story or a moment or something make you generate the idea it will be a poem versus this
No,
will be
the poem comes in a kind of attraction of sounds. Do you know what I mean? In a kind of an arrangement, and sometimes in an image, and it stays with you. And then there might be another image to come. So you leave it in the notebook for a little while. While the other thing comes as a paragraph, paragraph down, paragraph down, paragraph down, and then it might just hump away and stay quiet. And so you wait till the following day to put in. But the poem, it's a little finished little tract, then another little addition over a period.
And plays?
Plays come, as a matter of fact, you could be asked to do a play and you could sit down and do it in 3 or 4 months, because it's haunting you in another way. And it's just that sort of thing of looking at the stage mentally, hearing the voices and staying with the voices all the way through. I did one in a prison once. It was kind of extraordinary. I was down with them, they would be long timers inside, and I suddenly decided to go with the name of the play, Serious, because one time I was doing, kind of thing with them, and one fella behind was smiling, and I said, "Please, would you be serious?" "Serious? I don't do serious. Serious is bitter, and bitterness is sour, and I'm not bucking sour, so don't do serious, okay?" And I decided to go ahead with the play and call it Serious. And the first time we got in, I had the 4 cells ready for them with lights coming across. And they went in, and then one of them said, "Dermot, where's the walls?" The walls in between. I didn't have any walls, just the light. And I said, "Imagine there are walls." "How can I imagine there are bucking walls? Do you see that fella laughing at me? Pretend he's not there. How can I pretend look at him?" And I said, "Pretend he's not there." "Dermot, will you?" And then about 5 weeks later, coming to the end, he said, "But geez, now I know what you mean. I can say what I like and he can't respond." And they were brilliant in it. And so that play came out of no place. So sometimes play could come out of just someone saying a line like that. I think we've done enough, haven't we?
Yeah, all right, we'll get you down.
No, I think I'm getting too talkative.
I don't know. Could we give Dermot a big round of applause?